Have you ever wondered why you often find yourself sacrificing your own peace for the comfort of others? It's a subtle art, this self-erasure, practiced by many without conscious awareness, yet leaving behind a hollow ache in the soul. It's the silent agreement to dim your own light so that another's glow isn't overshadowed. The unspoken promise to absorb discomfort rather than disrupt the delicate equilibrium of a relationship. This insidious pattern, often born from a deep-seated need for acceptance or a fear of conflict, manifests as the pain you hide to keep others comfortable. It's a masquerade where your authentic self is hidden behind a carefully constructed facade of agreeable serenity, and the cost is often borne in the quiet moments of solitude when the true weight of your emotional suppression becomes unbearable. Consider the story of Alara, a woman whose life was a masterclass in this very art. From a tender age, Alara learned that her worth was intrinsically tied to the happiness of those around her. Her mother, a woman perpetually teetering on the edge of emotional volatility, found solace in Alara's compliance. A spilled glass of milk wasn't just a mishap. It was an invitation for a torrent of despair. Alara quickly deduced that her own distress, her own childish frustrations, were secondary to maintaining her mother's fragile composure. She became adept at anticipating needs, at preemptively smoothing over potential wrinkles in the fabric of their daily life. Her laughter became a performance, her tears a secret indulgence. As she grew, this pattern deepened. In her friendships, Alara was the unwavering confidant, the one who listened endlessly to woes without ever burdening others with her own. She was the anchor, always strong, always composed, even as her own internal world sometimes felt like a tempest. Her first serious relationship with Liam was a profound amplifier of this ingrained behavior. Liam, charismatic and charming, possessed a streak of unpredictable moods. One moment, he was the picture of adoration. The next, a cloud would descend, silent and heavy, requiring careful navigation. Alara almost instinctively began to walk on emotional tiptoes. She stifled her opinions if they clashed with his, choosing silence over potential disagreement. She rearranged her schedule, canceled plans with friends, and adjusted her desires to align seamlessly with his, all to avoid the discomfort of his displeasure. If he was stressed, she became his calm harbor, absorbing his anxieties without a ripple. If he was angry, she became the passive recipient, validating his frustrations rather than challenging them. Even when deep down, a quiet protest stirred within her, she found herself smiling through uncomfortable jokes, agreeing to activities that drained her, and offering reassurance she herself desperately needed. The small, almost imperceptible concessions accumulated, like pebbles in a shoe, until they became an unbearable weight. One evening, after a particularly draining day at work, Alara confessed to Liam a minor frustration she'd experienced. It was a fleeting comment, a gentle murmur of discontent. Liam, preoccupied with his own anxieties about a looming deadline, barely registered her words. He responded with a dismissive wave of his hand and a terse, "It's not that big of a deal, Alara. You're overthinking it." In that moment, something shifted within her. It wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic revelation, but a quiet, almost imperceptible crack in the dam she had meticulously built. The casual dismissal, the implicit invalidation of her small hurt, highlighted the chasm between her outward presentation and her inner reality. She realized then that the discomfort she harbored was not only invisible to him, but actively minimized. The pain she hid was not only for his comfort but also, paradoxically, reinforced his inability to truly see her. The twist was not in his reaction, which was predictable, but in her own sudden clarity. It was a small spark of rebellion, a whisper of self-awareness that began to challenge the narrative she had lived by for so long. She saw how her desire to maintain peace had, in fact, created an internal war. The emotional atmosphere in her life, once a carefully curated facade of tranquility, began to show fissures. The loneliness she often felt, previously masked by her tireless efforts to please, became more pronounced. She would lie awake at night, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only witness to her internal dialogue, replaying conversations, dissecting her own words, and wondering what it would feel like to simply be. The contrast between her vibrant inner world and the muted, agreeable persona she presented to the world became a source of increasing dissonance. She found herself envying friends who voiced their opinions freely, who navigated disagreements with assertive grace, even if it meant a temporary ruffle of feathers. Her smile, once a genuine expression, often felt stretched and artificial, a silent testament to the unspoken burdens she carried. She began to notice the subtle withdrawal from her own passions, the hobbies she'd once loved, replaced by activities that aligned more with Liam's interests. The vibrant colors of her individuality seemed to fade, replaced by a monochrome palette designed for maximum blending. Alara's journey exemplifies the shadow archetype, the unconscious aspects of the personality that the conscious ego does not identify with. In her case, her anger, her needs, her authentic desires were relegated to the shadow, deemed unacceptable or disruptive. She became a living embodiment of the persona, the social mask we wear, sacrificing her true self on the altar of perceived harmony. This pattern often stems from early attachment experiences, where the individual learns that their true emotions are not safe to express. For those caught in this intricate dance, the solution lies in a courageous journey of individuation, a process of integrating the conscious with the unconscious, embracing the shadow rather than suppressing it. It demands a deliberate choice to reestablish boundaries, to articulate needs, and to allow for the uncomfortable friction that often precedes genuine connection. It requires acknowledging that your discomfort is not a flaw, but a signal, and that the discomfort of others, when stemming from your authentic expression, is their responsibility, not yours to absorb. Begin by noticing the small instances where you self-silence, where you choose external peace over internal integrity. Ask yourself, what am I hiding, and why? What would happen if I dared to reveal a sliver of my true self, even if it risked a momentary ripple in the calm surface? The path to healing begins with this gentle, yet profound, act of self-reclamation. The deeper currents of this hidden pain often flow from a profound misunderstanding of interpersonal dynamics, a miscalculation of how genuine connection is forged. It's the silent burden of the unseen, the unspoken sacrifice that, far from fostering intimacy, often creates a subtle yet powerful chasm. What truly happens when we continually prioritize external comfort over internal authenticity? The answer, as many psychologists have explored, lies in the intricate interplay of our projected selves and the unconscious expectations we place upon others. Carl Rogers, a pioneer in humanistic psychology, posited that the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. This profound insight cuts to the heart of the pain we hide. When Alara, and countless others like her, deny their true feelings, their authentic needs, and their discomforts for the sake of another's ease, they are fundamentally rejecting a part of themselves. This self-rejection, fueled by a fear of disapproval or conflict, creates a false self, a carefully curated persona designed for external consumption. The paradox here is that by not accepting her own discomfort, by not acknowledging her own pain, Alara inadvertently trapped herself in a cycle where true change, true growth in her relationships became impossible. How can a relationship evolve towards deeper understanding and mutual respect if one party is perpetually presenting a censored version of themselves? The very act of hiding one's pain to keep others comfortable prevents the genuine empathy and understanding that could lead to resolution and deeper connection. Freud's concept of repression also illuminates this hidden dynamic. He suggested that painful or unacceptable thoughts and desires are pushed into the unconscious, where they continue to exert influence. Alara's constant self-suppression was a form of repression. The little moments of annoyance, the simmering resentments, the unexpressed desires, these did not simply vanish. They were pushed down, accumulating in her psychological shadow, creating an internal pressure cooker. This repressed material, while unseen, manifested in subtle ways. A creeping sense of exhaustion, a vague irritability that would surface seemingly without cause, or a persistent feeling of being misunderstood, even by those she strove hardest to please. The emotional energy expended in keeping these feelings hidden was immense, a silent tax on her vitality. This explains why, Despite her efforts to create a peaceful environment, Alara often felt a profound sense of emotional fatigue. The unconscious, as Freud understood, always finds a way to express what is repressed, often through symptoms, anxieties, or a pervasive sense of disquiet. Building on this, Jung's concept of the shadow becomes particularly relevant. The shadow contains all the parts of ourselves we deem unacceptable and thus push away: our anger, our selfishness, our vulnerability, our true needs. When Alara consistently hid her pain, she was, in essence, casting these vital aspects of her being into her shadow. This isn't to say these parts are inherently bad, but rather that by denying them conscious expression, they don't simply disappear. Instead, they can become projected onto others. Perhaps Alara, subconsciously, might have projected her own unexpressed anger onto Liam when he exhibited his moods, seeing him as the sole source of difficult emotions, rather than acknowledging her own capacity for similar feelings that she had repressed. Or she might have projected her own deep-seated need for validation onto him, constantly seeking his approval because she had not validated her own emotional landscape. This projection, while subtle, creates a barrier to authentic relating, as one is interacting not with the other person as they truly are, but with a version of them colored by one's own unconscious material. Moreover, Albert Bandura's social learning theory sheds light on how such behavior is acquired and perpetuated. Alara likely observed and internalized patterns of self-sacrifice and emotional suppression from her early environment. If her primary caregivers modeled indirect communication, conflict avoidance, or prioritized external harmony over individual expression, she would have learned that this was the correct way to navigate relationships. This observational learning, reinforced by the positive, albeit superficial, outcomes of her agreeable behavior, temporary peace, avoidance of conflict, cemented the belief that hiding her pain was a successful strategy. The reinforcement, however, was often intermittent, leading to a tenacious adherence to the behavior, even when it caused internal distress. The validation she received for her easygoing nature, while seemingly positive, subtly reinforced the suppression of her authentic self. The archetype at play here is often the caregiver or martyr, but twisted into a self-defeating pattern. This individual, in their profound desire to nurture and protect, inadvertently sacrifices their own well-being. The theme is one of unconscious self-betrayal, where the very act of seeking external harmony leads to internal discord. This behavior, while seemingly altruistic, stems from a deeper insecurity about one's inherent worthiness of love and acceptance without constant accommodation. For those who find themselves in this pattern, the journey forward demands a conscious dismantling of these learned behaviors. Begin by recognizing the subtle cues your body sends when you are suppressing your truth, the tightening in your chest, the quiet resignation in your mind. Practice small acts of self-assertion. Voice a preference for a restaurant, gently decline an invitation that doesn't genuinely appeal, or express a minor disagreement respectfully. This isn't about becoming confrontational, but about cultivating a deeper relationship with your authentic self. You must challenge the deeply ingrained belief that your discomfort is a burden to others. Understand that true intimacy thrives on vulnerability, on the courage to share your full self, even the parts that feel messy or inconvenient. It is in this shared vulnerability, not in hidden pain, that genuine connection flourishes. You are worthy of relationships where your entire self is not only tolerated but celebrated. The ultimate liberation from the pain you hide to keep others comfortable lies in embracing the profound truth of self-possession. It's the courageous act of reclaiming your inner territory, acknowledging that your emotional landscape is yours alone to navigate, and that true peace emanates from within, not from the careful orchestration of external circumstances. This final, transformative step involves confronting the deepest roots of this pattern: the fear of authentic expression and the belief that your worth is conditional upon the approval of others. Consider the timeless wisdom of the Stoics, particularly Epictetus, who argued that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. While often interpreted as advice on attentive listening, it also speaks to the internal balance between receiving and expressing, between internalizing and externalizing. The pain you hide is often born from an imbalance, where the speaking of your authentic self is muted, and the listening to external expectations becomes dominant. For Alara, and for many like her, the lesson is not to speak more, but to speak truthfully, to allow the internal monologue of her authentic self to find voice, even if it initially creates a ripple of discomfort. The Stoic emphasis on what is within our control, our perceptions, our judgments, our reactions, is paramount here. The discomfort of others is their reaction. Our pain is our internal state. True freedom comes from understanding this distinction and choosing to manage our internal world rather than perpetually attempt to manage the external one. Let's re-enter Alara's story as she slowly began to untangle the threads of her learned behavior. The quiet rebellion that stirred within her, ignited by Liam's dismissive comment, continued to smolder. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but a series of small, intentional shifts, guided by a growing sense of self-awareness. She started with subtle acts of boundary setting. One evening, Liam suggested a movie she truly disliked. Instead of her usual acquiescence, she gently said, "You know, Liam, I'm not really in the mood for that tonight. How about we pick something else? Or I could catch up on some reading while you watch it." The words felt foreign on her tongue, almost rebellious. Liam, momentarily surprised, simply shrugged and found another option. This tiny victory, this small act of asserting a preference, felt monumental. It wasn't about defying him, but about honoring her own quiet desire. Slowly, Alara began to engage in what Carl Jung termed shadow work. She started journaling, not just about her day, but about the emotions she had suppressed. She wrote about the sting of Liam's dismissals, the resentment that quietly festered when her needs were overlooked, the weariness of constant self-editing. She confronted the parts of herself she had deemed unacceptable. Her anger, her occasional selfishness, her desperate need for recognition. She realized that these emotions, when acknowledged, were not monstrous but simply human. She started to see that her fear of conflict was often more debilitating than the conflict itself. She began to understand that the desire for external comfort had become a cage, and the key lay in her own hand. She remembered a quiet conversation with an old friend who, years ago, had told her, "Alara, you're so easygoing. Sometimes I wonder if you even have a temper." At the time, she'd taken it as a compliment. Now, it resonated differently, a veiled observation of her self-erasure. This process of individuation for Alara was not linear. There were moments of fear where the old patterns tried to reassert themselves. She felt the urge to apologize for expressing a divergent opinion, to quickly smooth over a moment of tension. But with each small step, each gentle push against the tide of her ingrained habits, she gained strength. She started to understand that her emotional regulation was her responsibility, and that it wasn't her job to regulate the emotions of others. She began to communicate her needs more directly, sometimes with trepidation, but always with a growing sense of integrity. "I feel overwhelmed when," she might start, rather than just silently absorbing. This shift in communication often led to initial friction, as Liam, accustomed to her agreeable nature, sometimes reacted with surprise or even slight irritation. But Alara held her ground, not with aggression, but with quiet conviction. She learned to sit with the discomfort of another's temporary displeasure, understanding that it was a necessary growing pain in the journey towards genuine connection. She discovered that by allowing herself to be fully seen, she also created space for Liam to truly see her, not just the reflection of his own desires. The climax of Alara's journey wasn't a dramatic breakup or a grand pronouncement. It was a quiet morning, months into her new path. Liam, stressed about a work presentation, was snapping at small things. Usually, Alara would have retreated into herself, trying to placate him with soothing words or a silent presence. This time, she felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the old urge to disappear. But then, a new feeling emerged, a steady calm. She took a deep breath, and instead of reacting to his mood, she simply stated, calmly but firmly, "Liam, I understand you're stressed, but I need you to speak to me with kindness. I won't accept being spoken to that way." The air in the room seemed to hold its breath. Liam paused, visibly taken aback. For a moment, she thought he might erupt. Instead, he deflated, a sigh escaping him. "You're right," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. I'm just incredibly stressed." In that moment, a new dynamic was forged. It wasn't about her fixing his discomfort. It was about her asserting her worth, and in doing so, creating a pathway for genuine, respectful interaction. She realized that by honoring her own truth, she wasn't destroying the relationship. She was inviting a stronger, more authentic one. The character of Alara, once a quiet chameleon archetype, adapting her colors to blend seamlessly into her environment, has begun her metamorphosis into the sovereign of self. Her journey highlights the theme of intrinsic self-worth over external validation. This profound shift requires a deep dive into trauma psychology, recognizing how early experiences might have conditioned the belief that safety lies in self-effacement. It demands an understanding of our modern self-worth, often intertwined with social media likes and external approval, and a deliberate move towards an internal locus of control. For you, the viewer, if Alara's story resonates, understand this. The pain you hide is a signal, a whisper from your deepest self begging for attention. Healing this pain isn't about becoming selfish, but about becoming whole. It's about recognizing that your authentic self, with all its needs and imperfections, is not a burden, but a gift. Begin by cultivating stillness within. Meditate, walk in nature, engage in activities that nourish your soul, independent of anyone else's preferences. These practices are not escapes. They are acts of self-parenting, nurturing the part of you that has been historically neglected. Challenge your negative thought patterns that insist you must always prioritize others. Remember, as Carl Jung suggested, self-acceptance is the first step to genuine change. Your power lies not in your ability to absorb, but in your courage to express. Your internal strength will transform your outer reality. Embrace the discomfort of truthful expression. It is the fertile ground from which authentic connection grows. You are not meant to be a quiet echo in someone else's life. You are meant to be the vibrant, resounding song of your own. What small, courageous act will you take today to reclaim a piece of the pain you've been hiding? How will you begin to honor the full spectrum of your being, knowing that your authenticity is your greatest gift, not a burden? Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and share this video with others who might benefit from these insights. Thank you for listening. The END.